One of the main myths that occultists and pagan religions believe to disprove the deity of Jesus, his story, the Trinity, and concepts of God are that the story of Jesus and certain concepts of the story match up to pagan beliefs and occultic philosophies, like sun worship, the 4 seasons, the rising and the dying of the sun, the birth of the sun on December 25th, and all of the seasonal changes, our calendar, etc., all have similar numbers and symbols and things that have to do with Christianity as well. Many popular esoteric and occultic writers compare the two ideologies and explain that the Christians are just ignorant and stuck in a form of sun worship, calling it Jesus Christ, when really they are worshiping the actual sun god Ra and the Trinity of the rising noonday and the setting of the sun. Take, for example, these statements from Alice Bailey from The Externalization of the Hierarchy, page 151, that states, quote, "To this everlasting compassion, the cyclic appearance of the sun gods of the ancient myths, the world's saviors, and the avatars bear witness and are the guarantee," end quote. Consider Albert Pike in his book titled Morals and Dogma, page 109, that states, quote, "The teachers, even of Christianity, are in general the most ignorant of the true meaning of that which they teach. There is no book of which so little is known as the Bible. To most who read it, it is as incomprehensible as the Zohar," end quote. Consider statements from Manly P. Hall from The Secret Teachings of All Ages, page 49 through 51, that states, quote, "The adoration of the sun was one of the earliest and most natural forms of religious expression. From a deep philosophic consideration of the powers and the principles of the sun has come the concept of the Trinity as it's understood in the world today. This orb, being the symbol of all light, has 3 distinct phases: rising, midday, and setting. The coming of the sun was hailed with joy. The time of its departure was viewed as a period to be set aside for sorrow and unhappiness. The glorious radiant orb of the day, the true light which lighteth every man who cometh into the world, the supreme benefactor who raised all things from the dead, who fed the hungry multitude, who stilled the tempest, who after dying rose again and restored all things to life. This supreme spirit of humanitarianism and philanthropy is known to Christendom as Christ, the Redeemer of the worlds, the only begotten of the Father, the Word made flesh, and the hope of glory," end quote. And consider Helena Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 340, that states, quote, "It is useless and vain for the Protestants to exclaim against the Roman Catholics, based on the ancient cult of lunar goddesses, which they themselves worship Jehovah, preeminently a lunar god, and when both churches have accepted in their theologies the Son Christ of the lunar Trinity," end quote. We can see clearly in the Bible that this is not the case. You can see many scriptures in the Bible that debunk these theories, one of them being in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 5, that states, quote, "He did away with the pagan priests appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem, those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, to the constellations, and all the starry hosts," end quote. So there are many scriptures in the Bible where God forbids his people to sacrifice to the moon, to the stars, and to the sun, and to worship them as deities. In addition, there are other similarities, like Jesus having 12 disciples and there being 12 months of the year, celebrating the risen Christ in spring, which is when pagans worship Ishtar, who has to do with the sun, and many other similarities between pagan and Christian beliefs. And I will admit that there are a lot of similarities between seasons, the types of worship, the days of the week, our calendar year, and so on and so forth. But let us analyze this a little bit further, instead of just saying, oh, Jesus isn't real, because the concepts of him and the Trinity and his story match up with all these pagan beliefs, so they just must be the same thing. We need to take a step further and ask, why are these similar? Well, let's start out by asking, where do the pagans and occultists get these concepts? Where did our calendar year come from? Where do seasons come from? Where did all these ideas actually come from? Well, pagans and occultists have stories about how they believed that the fallen angels or fallen beings from heaven fell and taught mankind the secrets of the mystery schools, or the secrets of the initiates, or the ancient wisdom, or whatever you want to call it. The story changes a bit from culture to culture, but the bottom line is that every ancient civilization has a story of heavenly beings falling down and teaching mankind ancient wisdoms. Well, the Bible also explains that heavenly beings fell and taught mankind these things as well. So if the pagans and the Christians believe the same story, that heavenly fallen beings taught mankind these things, then we can all agree that this is where it comes from. Now, if that's where it comes from, and these fallen beings taught them, then they must be heavenly or supernatural created concepts that they saw in heaven or in another dimension or in another realm, and then brought it here to this earth. So what if pagans are actually borrowing ideas, concepts, seasons, calendars, days, zodiac signs, etc. from heaven, and then are changing it based on the different gods that they worship and the way the fallen angels taught mankind to interpret these things? There are so many similarities because it came from heaven. It came from another realm where, by the way, the pre-existent Jesus Christ lives. The Bible states that Jesus is a pre-existent deity. God, the Father, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, this Trinity, is a pre-existent being that existed before all these pagan concepts even existed. Because the pagans wouldn't even have these concepts if it wasn't for the fallen angels who came from there, who fell in rebellion against God and taught mankind these things. So what if pagans are trying to interpret Jesus, the Trinity, based off of earthly knowledge given to their teachers by fallen angels who get these concepts from another realm? And then they want to interpret Jesus and put him in that box based off what they know of this physical world or this world made of matter, which we all agree, pagans and occultists and Christians alike, that is not the real world. Matter only exists because of the unseen realm that makes it happen. In conclusion, I feel we should all stop pretending and trying to figure out the deity of Jesus based on the similarities of his story, the Trinity, and his concepts with pagan concepts. The difference is the pagan worship hundreds of gods based off these fallen angels that deify themselves and their ungodly offspring, attributing some of these principles and things to the one true God who created them in the first place. Even though the term Christianity is a newer term, and a lot of Christian religions like Catholicism and different kinds of religions that claim to be Christian were created after the ancient pagan beliefs, the concept of believing in Jesus Christ and the Trinity of the one true God remains a pre-existent idea and being. This is where false trinities come from, because the idea, again, existed in heaven first, was brought down to the earth, and then a copy of it was taught of the one true God. So to say a Christian is celebrating the sun or a pagan deity is not completely accurate, because their belief is in the one true God and into the one true Trinity, which again predates all of this earthly belief system. And I would like to say for the record that as a Christian myself and a believer in Jesus, that he is the only one true God and the only way to heaven. I am not saying that God created pagan beliefs. All I'm trying to point out is say that God is a God of order, structure, and detail, and he has seasons and has a cyclical way of doing things and viewing things that is not matched up to our Greek thought or our linear way of thinking. And so it's possible that these beings could have seen things and taken some of these seasonal cyclical concepts, brought them down to this earth, creating false religions and leading people away from God.